Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is May 7th. On this day back in 1896, one of America's first and most infamous serial killers, H.H. Holmes, was executed in Philadelphia. His crimes, trial, and eventual death sentence shocked the public at the time and have fascinated people ever since. Holmes' story has taken on an almost mythical status, but behind the headlines and the haunting nickname was a man whose capacity for manipulation, deceit, and violence was very real. Today, we're exploring who H.H. Holmes really was, the gruesome legacy he left behind, and what happened in the final chapter of his life. Let's get started. Before he became known as H.H. Holmes, he was Herman Webster Mudgett, born on May 16, 1861 in Gilmanton, New Hampshire. He grew up in a strict and often abusive household. His father, Levi Mudgett, was a heavy drinker and disciplinarian, and stories from Holmes's early life suggest that he may have experienced both physical and psychological abuse. Despite his difficult upbringing, Holmes was highly intelligent and showed an early interest in medicine. He studied at Phillips Exeter Academy and went on to attend the University of Vermont, though he did leave after a year. Eventually, he enrolled in the University of Michigan's Department of Medicine and Surgery, graduating in 1884. But Holmes wasn't your average medical student. His ultimate goal wasn't to help people. It was much darker. While in school, Holmes worked in the anatomy lab and learned how to handle cadavers, skills that would later take a dark turn. He was involved in grave robbing and insurance fraud schemes, sometimes taking out policies on fake people and using stolen corpses to collect payouts. It was not only disturbing, but it also laid the groundwork for what he would do next. In 1886, Holmes moved to Chicago and began working at a pharmacy in the Englewood neighborhood. Not long after, he built a 3-story building nearby that would go down in crime history as the so-called Murder Castle. The structure reportedly included trapdoors, secret passageways, soundproof rooms, and even a crematorium. It was designed, it seems, not just as a place of business, but as a literal death trap. During the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, an event that brought millions of people to Chicago, Holmes lured victims to his hotel. Many of them, primarily young women looking for work or lodging, were never seen again. Eventually, Holmes's long trail of cons and killings caught up with him. In July 1894, he was arrested in St. Louis for selling mortgaged goods. While in jail, he shared an insurance fraud scheme with another inmate, Marion Hedgepeth. Holmes planned to fake his own death and collect the insurance money, and promised Hedgepeth a cut if he could recommend a lawyer to help. That lawyer, Jephthah Howe, did get involved, but the plan fell apart when the insurance company got suspicious and refused to pay out. Not one to be deterred, Holmes shifted his plan to involve a real person, his associate, Benjamin Pitezel. Holmes was supposed to fake Pitezel's death and collect the insurance money, but instead he murdered him in Philadelphia in September 1894. Tragically, he then convinced Pitezel's widow to let him take 3 of their children into his care. Holmes murdered all 3. He was eventually arrested in Boston on November 17, 1894, thanks to the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. He was initially detained on a warrant for a horse theft in Texas, but investigators quickly realized that they had something much bigger on their hands. Detective Frank Geyer of the Philadelphia Police was assigned to track down the missing Pitezel children. His search led to a grim discovery. 2 of the children's bodies were located in Toronto, and the 3rd was found in Indianapolis. Holmes's trial for the murder of Benjamin Pitezel began on October 28, 1895 in Philadelphia. It drew massive public attention, with newspapers covering every twist. Holmes initially tried to represent himself, but later accepted legal counsel. Despite his efforts to shift blame and maintain his innocence, the jury wasn't convinced. On November 2nd, 1895, Holmes was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by hanging. After his conviction, he made a series of written confessions, claiming responsibility for 27 murders. But many of the people he said he killed were later found alive, making it hard to separate fact from fiction. Still, there was no doubt that he had taken lives, and perhaps many more than could be proven. Holmes's execution took place on the morning of May 7, 1896, at Moyamensing Prison in Philadelphia. According to witnesses, he was calm and collected right up to the end. He spent his final night writing letters and reportedly slept soundly, which is pretty unusual for somebody facing the gallows. That morning, after receiving his last rites from spiritual advisors, he was led to the execution chamber. About 100 people were in attendance, including a jury of 12 men appointed by the judge, mostly city officials and medical professionals. Before the hanging, Holmes made one last statement. He denied killing anyone except for 2 women who he claimed had died as a result of what he called criminal operations. He didn't provide names or specifics. At 10:12 a.m., the trapdoor beneath his feet dropped. Though some stories have claimed that he slowly strangled to death, the fall actually broke his neck, and he was pronounced dead about 30 minutes later. Holmes had always feared what might happen to his body after death. He worried it would be dug up, dissected, or put on display. To prevent that, he requested to be buried 10 feet deep in cement. His request was granted, and he was interred at Holy Cross Cemetery in Yeadon, Pennsylvania. Even in death, Holmes remained a source of national fascination. Newspapers and dime novels of the time ran wild with his story, often exaggerating the number of victims. Though he did confess to 27 murders before knocking the number down to 2, some accounts claim that he may have killed over 200 people. To this day, there's no definitive count, just speculation. The murder castle itself didn't last much longer. In August 1895, it was damaged in a suspicious fire. Witnesses claimed they saw 2 men entering the building shortly before flames broke out, and many believe that it was intentionally set, possibly to prevent the structure from becoming a ghoulish tourist attraction. The building stood for a few more decades before it was finally torn down in 1938. Today, the site is home to the Englewood branch of the U.S. Post Office. More than a century after his execution, rumors still swirled that Holmes had somehow escaped and faked his death. In 2017, researchers at the University of Pennsylvania exhumed his body to put the rumors to rest. True to his burial request, his remains were encased in cement and were remarkably well preserved. His mustache was still visible, his clothing was intact. Dental records and DNA testing confirmed it. The man inside was H.H. Holmes. H.H. Holmes' story continues to inspire books, documentaries, and even fictional retellings. Eric Larson's best-selling book, The Devil in the White City, brought Holmes back into the spotlight by weaving his crimes into the backdrop of the 1893 World's Fair. But underneath all the headlines and the Hollywood portrayals, Holmes' legacy is a reminder of how dangerous charm and intelligence can be when twisted by cruelty. His life is a cautionary tale about evil hiding in plain sight and how systems, both legal and social, can fail to catch it in time. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found H.H. Holmes' story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!